So I do want to make sure that we dedicate a reasonable amount of time to that today.
I'm happy to talk about it tomorrow as well.
Okay.
I am not available to talk about this tomorrow, unfortunately, but I trust you all to do the right thing.
Well,
as everybody smiles to that comment.
Yeah. So as I wrote in the agenda at some point, let me see if I can find the agenda again. You know, I think there are at least two questions that need to be answered. There are actually more than two questions that came up when I was looking at this, but one is, do we think Windows support meets the bar for GA in 113? Like, does enough functionality work? Do we have good enough tests? Do we have good enough docs to explain to users what works, what doesn't, what the other gotchas are? I'm not aware of any Windows-specific features per se, just stuff that works differently, whether it's DNS search query paths or quirks of volumes and things like that. I think it would be good to get a handle on that topic as quickly as possible. And then with respect to usability, actually there's a question I didn't really note down in the agenda, which is, what do we want the user experience to be? Right now, all certified providers support Linux. I don't expect that to radically change in the near future. So if there were clusters with window nodes, do we expect users to manually taint them or label them or whatever? And then specifically for how the tests work, what do we expect to happen? You know, I think that does need a little bit more thought about the user experience as well as how we run the tests. Now, specifically with the question of should this have a profile or not, and should we block on that for GA, I'm coming to the conclusion that we should not block on it for GA. No other optional feature, and this is an optional feature because, you know, most providers won't. Sorry. All right, we're switching.
Can't hear you, Brian.
Yeah, you should be good now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We were switching over to room mic. What I was saying, yeah, it is going to be an optional feature. No optional features are covered by Conformance today, or at least that's the intent. So, you know, if we expect a small number of providers to support this feature in the near future, I don't think it's critical to carve out a profile for it right now. I'm thinking we should sort out what we want with profiles. I would like to have it be tested. So, you know, we do need some way of running the tests, but I would say we treat it as an optional feature. And once there are enough providers that are supporting it, then it's worth having a profile to make sure that all the providers that support it in a consistent way. I see a bunch of +1s in the chat. You know, Tim and I and others who are starting to dig into it are learning interesting things about Windows. You know, so I think there's still some concerns about doesn't meet the GA bar, although I'm getting warmer and fuzzier feelings about that. But we need to get really crisp about what we think the bar is.
Is there any part of this decision making, and Tim, you had your hand up, so I want to give you time to talk. I just want to make sure that is there a decision that we need to make specifically now, or is there something that needs to be resolved for the mailing list, or where are we at on that?
Well, we can decide now if we have the right deciders. We should communicate it by the mailing list as well. But my proposal is that what we work on ASAP is deciding what the bar is for GA for Windows. And then we take a hard look at whether it meets that bar in 113, and we decouple the profile discussion, the conformance profile discussion, and not make that a blocker for Windows GA.
Okay.
Just one question. Is it a realistic option to decouple the GA question from the conformance question? So
I think it is, and as I said before, no other optional feature today is part of the conformance test suite, or at least that's the intent. And as an optional feature, it would be unique. It has a fairly large surface area compared to most other optional features. And we expect there to be demand for the feature, but no providers that I'm aware of have Windows support. I could be wrong. Does Azure have Windows support?
So if we look at the tooling that's used to set up the clusters, we've got automation working on both on Azure and on GCE. No commercial supported provider has announced support for this yet because they're looking on the signal from the Kubernetes project, which is why getting this initial set marked stable is so important, because that paves the way for all the different providers to package this up and support it long term.
Okay, Tim's.
Oh, I thought Tim was going first.
Oh,
Tim,
are you
yeah,
going
you were.
first?
I don't want to rush these decisions, and I agree with most of what Brian had said. I would really like to have an actual requirements list of what it means for Windows support, like an actual hard list that we adhere to and do our due diligence on this, so that we're at least it's very clear and explicit, because a lot of times we haven't done that and we haven't done our due diligence. I know it's hard work, and I know that we have limited resources, but I do think that it is worthwhile to put this effort in to start, maybe even breaking out those who want to work on it as a sub-project to actually execute on defining that list.
and you had something to say?
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of play off that, we sort of have a list in the list of EDE tests, right? That doesn't cover every feature that Kubernetes has, but it covers a lot of them. And running down the list that Patrick and team have put together, there's clearly some on there that are phrased in a way that makes them Linux specific, but I'm not sure they have to be if we were just willing to either rename or retarget the test. What I don't know is... I
assume the tests fail, which is why they're in their list. It's not because of the title of the test.
Well, sure, yes, but could they pass if we substituted the word access control or mode, right? Like, just to pick on that one in particular, I feel like the concept applies, but the words and the implementation are wrong.
Meaning we'd have to have a customized test for each.
Yes.
Platform.
So the point I'm getting to is I haven't done, and I don't know if you guys have done on the Windows side, a full, I can't believe I'm going to say it out loud, but a full API audit of every field transitively through pod to see, does it have an equivalent in the Windows world or not, and are we okay with those deltas?
Yeah, so I've got a partial list started, and I've got that other issue linked. Let me see if it's in the meeting notes there. But my plan was to go back through and update those in the reference, in the generate API reference over the next couple of weeks before code freeze. And so that was one of the tasks that I had planned to complete there. And so right now I've got an outline of what's there, but I still need to get the PRs in place.
So is that a yes that you've looked at them but you haven't documented them all, or yes, I've looked at some of them but not all of them?
I've looked at everything that's under pod and container.
Okay.
Quentin?
Oh, me.
Dems, then Quentin, sorry.
Okay. So I kind of like the decoupling idea for sure. But then are we saying that for 113, if in a cluster there are Windows nodes, the cluster is still going to be conformant because it passes the existing list of tests? Is that the approach that we're going to take for 113?
You mean if it has Linux nodes?
Yeah, so I mean, it has a mixture of Linux and Windows nodes. It's still going to be conformant. And we are not trying to say which tests run where, but overall all the tests run. Is that what we are trying to say?
Yes,
113?
that's a known issue with conformance currently, and we need to decide whether and what we might do about that. But that's true for other kinds of functionality as well. So that's partly touches on what I was saying before about the user experience and how the tests are run, and do we expect the nodes to be tainted or labeled, or how we expect that to work. I think we need some.
Right. Again, this is just a 113 statement, right? Say we do decoupling, right? And we say that, okay, and based on that, we'll do whether we can mark it GA or not. So then the follow-up to that is, when we make that decision and say, okay, fine, we are ready to go GA in 113, and then we have to then make a statement about, okay, in your cluster, in addition to Linux nodes, if you have Windows nodes, it's still going to be conformant. That is basically what we're going to say, right?
I think the way I interpret what Brian's saying, and I think I agree with, is we don't take a position on Windows nodes with respect to conformance.
For now.
For now.
Yes.
And when that topic comes up, we will have to talk about what does that mean for people who are already shipping Windows who might not be meeting the current definition of conformance. I think we absolutely need to get to the place of conformance, but I don't know we need to block it right now. The alternative is perpetual beta until we get this conformance stuff worked out.
So we have Quentin and then Tim, and we're vastly running out of time here.
Yeah. I just had a very quick question about what exactly the message is that the Microsoft folks want to send out with respect to conformance. So, I mean, one option, which I think is the one on the table, is that, you know, we build a cluster that has Linux nodes, we run all the conformance tests, they all pass, but actually they don't pass using Windows containers. But then it's very difficult to make a statement that, you know, Windows is Kubernetes conformant or anything like that. On the flip side, you know, when the conformance program was first created, there were clearly lots of tests that should have been required for to declare a cluster conformant, but we just didn't have the tests yet, or they didn't run properly on enough distributions that we could use them as part of the conformance test, in which case we just temporarily said, okay, you don't have to pass those yet. We're going to fix the tests in the future so that they, you know, better. And I guess that's another option here. And yeah, so that was a question, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, so basically the signal that I'm looking at here is like, when I look at what Kubernetes calls something that's beta or stable, a stable API is one that we're not going to, you know, pull the rug out from under a customer and say, you can't use this anymore. What we're trying to say is the Windows support is here to stay. Here's the initial support or supported features that are there that are going to work on Windows, so that way customers can start deploying with confidence. And then, you know, of course, that feature set will grow over time. And so I agree that getting the conformance profile is important, but that's not necessarily a separate thing. And yes, node tainting and node selectors work today.
And is that the UX you intend for users to use for the foreseeable future?
The UX I've been using for the last 2 years has been beta.kubernetes.io/os as a node selector.
Okay, so Tim Sinclair.
I just wanted to make the statement that SIG Cluster Lifecycle has officially had the position for quite some time now that we do not support heterogeneous deployment environments, right? The reason being is because there hasn't been an official policy for how we want to manage a mixed architecture style of deployment, right? It's fine if SIG Arch puts the position that, you know, taints and toleration is what we will use for heterogeneous environments, and then we will go forth and make sure that that is tested and has coverage. But as of today, we do not have that signal from SIG Cluster Lifecycle at all.
Okay, so I have a specific proposal, which is the people who want to continue this discussion, we move the discussion about what is the bar for Windows GA to Kubernetes SIG Windows. And we moved the question about conformance to the conformance working group mailing list and continue the discussion there. But currently didn't sound like there was strong pushback to the proposal to decouple them, so I'll announce that to both lists.
I'm +1 on that. I just want to look at that list of the documentation of all the fields that are different from the Linux base.
So the link to the GA plan was posted to the chat. It's also in the notes. If we can just use that as the index to link out to all related things, list of tests, list of fields, whatever, I think that would be a useful thing to use that doc for that.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks for the great discussion. Let's move on and be really mindful of time because we are now in a deficit. The charter discussion, I put this link in here today. Quentin added some in-depth commentary about prior unresolved discussions to the PR. Quentin, do you want to speak to that since you're the sort of person right now that's most concerned about that?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to. So we had, I think this is probably the 4th iteration of the charter, which we haven't merged yet, and the first 3, I think, generated quite a lot of debate, both on 2 versions of the document, I think, and then a previous PR to this one, plus email lists and stuff. And I'm a bit concerned that we've kind of swept all of that stuff away, and we've got a charter at the moment which basically doesn't address any of that stuff. And so there are 2 approaches. One is to just basically acknowledge that this charter doesn't say very much and doesn't talk to those topics, and we're going to fix it in the 5th revision of the charter. Or we say, let's bite the bullet now, not merge this thing until we've resolved those items. Yeah, I would rather not merge it and not acknowledge that there are specific, pretty important unresolved issues. Or we need to decide they're resolved because, the chairs have decided that they're resolved and that's the end of the story. But it seems we're sort of in this no man's land in between these states.
So I think if I can try to summarize the specific issues, I didn't have time before the meeting. I checked yesterday, but the additional comments were posted after I checked. The 2 main issues, I think, are corporate diversity amongst chairs and SIG leadership generally, for whatever SIG leadership means. And the second one is who's the decider on technical escalations. Are those the 2 main concerns, or are there other additional concerns?
Yeah, I think those are probably the main ones, wrapped up in the whole, what are the actual sub-projects, who are the leads of these sub-projects, because I don't think that's actually documented anywhere. I know DIMS
is documented, right? I thought that's what DIMS PR'd in.
Well, when I say not documented, maybe in the last week, but I haven't actually seen the details. You might be right. It might have been resolved up to now. Yeah,
so DIMS, so we had the earlier email thread that you were on, Quentin, about fleshing out the sub-projects, which was in, the previous drafts of the charter, and were refined and simplified based on feedback. DIMS PR'd that information in. It is now in 6.yaml and in the README. As far as tech leads of all of the sub-projects, the projects that have been operating on kind of for a longer period of time do have explicit leads. For the API governance, it's the API approvers. For Conformance, right now the 2 people who are the approvers are me and Clayton. And we've talked about, we actually are actively working to expand that list as people try participate in Conformance and review and come up to speed. And I'll still call out that if people do want to be involved, that is the number of times people have said, well, we should make this a sub-project. I mean, we have some sub-projects. If you want to be involved with API reviews or conformance test reviews, just reach out to me, to Aaron, to the people who are involved with that. And it's, I think, or just email the SIG Arch mailing list if you have any doubts about who the right contacts are, or reach out to me and Jace as the chairs of the SIG, and we'll point you in the direction. Some sub-projects, code organization sub-projects is really unstaffed. So that is one where we do need to get some people to step up and drive that. And then KEP has had very, changing people driving and being involved with that over time. So I don't know if the list of deciders is up to date for that.
There's a PR for that open right now, actually.
Okay, so for, a lot of escalations that come up end up going to the API approvers effectively. So we have an existing decision body there. Other feedback has been informal, like if someone does a review to...
Sorry, Brian, just to cut you short, because I know we've got a lot of other stuff on the agenda. That's all fine. The crux of the matter here is just, should we merge a charter that doesn't deal with all the issues that have been brought up in the 3 drafts before it? Or should we explicitly list them as unresolved issues that we need to resolve, sooner rather than later?
Yeah, so I'm fine with either of those decisions, actually. The push to get some flavor of charters that's relatively consistent with the rest of the project is sort of an initiative of the steering committee if we want to put a to-do in there. I am fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. Okay. Resolve.
Okay, but I'll again just make a call. If someone wants to, we could use another chair if someone wants to start doing the work. We can help onboard someone. In most cases, I think it's issues like corporate diversity or explicitly documenting who is doing what is less of a problem, and right now we're bottlenecked on getting anybody to do things. So so this SIG is a bit different than the other SIGs in that other SIGs are used as coordination points for people who are actively doing things, and I'm trying to move this SIG in that direction as well, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, Matt, you had a thing, and I think Dim's after that.
Yeah, I just had 2 quick things. One of them I noticed in the charter recently, the line about no tech leads was taken out as a redundant line. And I was curious why that was taken out as redundant. I'm just trying to limit confusion that could come up in the future.
I asked for it to be taken out because it seemed to be causing confusion. I didn't realize it was a line from the charter template.
And the process says that the tech lead is optional in the document that we link to, but do you say in your own charter whether you opt in or you opt out of it? That's not clear anywhere. And so
I have just generally asked SIGs that decide to only have one role to specifically say that the chair also fulfills the responsibility of the tech lead, or vice versa if they decide they only want tech leads.
Well, what are the responsibilities of the tech lead? Because in most cases, the one explicit thing I saw in the template was creation of sub-projects, and that is stated in the charter.
Basically creation of sub-projects.
Yes.
Yeah, and just for clarity, because the document we link to doesn't say, it just says it's optional. If we opt in or opt out, it might be more clear to just say that in the charter. So that way it's not left up to the reader to say what way to go.
No other charter has done that, though.
I was sure that there's language in there that kind of said we're not doing that.
It says that we chose a federation of sub-project model.
Yeah, which is mutually exclusive to tech leads.
Okay. I didn't read that myself, but okay. If that's fine, that's fine. That's it. And then the other thing that I was just going to say real quick here before passing it off to Dims is that, we want a diversity of chairs on this, and I'm fully bought into that, but that actually requires, the chair job is a lot of work. And I've been chairing SIGs for a long time, a couple of years now. And if you're going to do a good job, it takes a lot of work. And I know that our chairs are a bit overwhelmed and they need help. And so if we want to get to diversity of it, it's not just a title that can be bestowed on folks. At least that's my 2 cents. It's actually folks who show up and chop wood and carry water on a whole lot of not all that exciting stuff. And so if we're going to get to that diversity, I mean, we actually have to have people who will do that work in order to get to that diversity, right? And so this is my challenge to anybody who's here who wants that diversity, to find bodies to show up and do that work for Jace's sake and for Brian's sake, so we can get to that diversity because people are doing the work. So I'll shut up now and pass it to Dims.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. That's right. I agree with what you said. So I would definitely want to merge the charter as is, and I can take the action item to re-listen to what Brian said before and what Quinton raised before, and make sure that additional language can be added to the charter later once this round merges.
Just to be clear, I think what Brian and I agreed was to explicitly add a to-do to address the concern that I linked in the notes here, and then work on resolving that to-do in a subsequent update to the PR.
Yeah, specifically for the 2 concerns I summarized.
Can I also make a sort of spot proposal, a hot take on this? I would like to propose that we add Matt Farina as a chair, because frankly, of the people who have been saying they would do things, the one person that has stepped up and done hours and hours of work on this now is Matt, and it also represents company diversity. Is there anybody who would disagree with that? Except
Does Matt disagree with that?
That's what I was just going to say.
Well, thank you. I'm entirely surprised at this, and I guess I would be okay with it.
I mean, you're already doing the work.
Thank you for the confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's this is how it should be. That people step up, clearly do a job, and then get recognized for it. That's what we should do.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Can I suggest that we perhaps give it maybe till after maybe 2 weeks? It would be great to find out who else may be interested, and I have no reservations about Matt, just to be clear. But I think if we're going to do this, we may as well, solicit whatever other candidates might be digging around. Dims comes to mind, and there are others as well, and see, put a list together and, see what it looks like and who is.
Well, so Quentin, I guess what I'm saying is that we've put this call out now for almost a year, and one person has stepped up materially to take over the chair duties from myself and Brian. Like this is plenty of people have had opportunity to do this, and really only one person has heeded the call.
And that's fine, but I do agree for point of process, it would be worthwhile to have this happen in some kind of written medium rather than, boom, let's just suddenly decide it right now. I already had problems with another SIG doing this sort of thing, where it was a similar situation where it was just suggested and everybody said yes on the video. And then we kind of just needed to simmer down and wait a week to make sure that everybody had a chance to.
Totally fine with that, but I don't want to open up a big election process for people, you know what I mean?
Well,
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, we can wait. We can give Matt time to think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, because then he'll decide not to.
About how much work it is. But I'll just plus one to what Jay said, which is, anybody who thinks they might want to do the job, reach out to us, and we are happy to help suggest useful things you might do, so that we can, so that you would be an obvious candidate for the future, right? Like, shouldn't be a vote. It should be, yeah, this person's already doing the job. I'm more than happy to just tilt the rest of the work items onto their shoulders.
A way to scare them off, Brian.
Yeah, Matt.
No, so there is one nice thing about waiting a couple more weeks. People may say, "Oh, I really want that," and they may take more of a load off Jace for a while. And you, Brian, Again, I'm okay waiting and with whatever.
I'm fine with that. Anybody who wants to do some of this schlep work, please bring it. Okay, so just to put a bow on this conversation, what we'll do is we'll merge the charter as is with the to-dos. I would love for somebody to propose the to-do language. Quentin, you seem like a pretty good candidate for that. And then we'll do the separate PR for leadership change, giving other folks a chance to respond and also to also put their hat in the ring if they want to start volunteering for the gig. Make sense? Yep. Okay, cool. All right, moving on. The 113 review. I'm not sure who put this on here, but I think it might have been Aaron, maybe. No?
This was, Brian had wanted to do this last
Okay.
week, and I asked that we punt it back by at least a week, given that we had already done it.
Okay. We're actually on track if we get this done on time.
I did it, and one of the reasons why I did it was to surface issues like Windows GA that probably we would want to know about. You know, that it should have been done earlier. I took a vacation at an inopportune time. There's never a good time to take vacation. But I mean, partly one thing I wanted to do is look for things that need more technical oversight. And another thing I wanted to do is to sanity check whether the things being surfaced through the 1.13 release processes matched the things that were getting surfaced through KEPs and API reviews and whatnot, and whether there was a disconnect. I didn't, because of the Windows issue, I've been spending time on that, so I didn't have time to go do the comparison. We could potentially do that as a postmortem later on if people are fine with that.
I mean, I'll just add, I feel like when we ran, I wanted us to run through the issues prior to feature freeze, and then I wanted us to run through them again prior to code freeze to give us 2 decision points where we could kick something out if it seemed like it was risky or unstable. I feel like the only ones that we weren't, so that generated a lot of Windows discussion. I feel like we have a plan for that, and we're happy. The only other one I am unsure of where we're at would be server-side apply and how we're feeling about landing that to master by code freeze.
The current expectation is that it'll be the first thing that is merged when the branch opens back up.
So not on 1.13.
That's I'd say like 80% probability of missing 13 at this point. We are going to have a PR out for review hopefully tomorrow or Monday, and maybe it'll be something reasonable to carry or to merge, but maybe not. We'll see. But we're not expecting to make it at this point. There's a long discussion of this in SIG API machinery yesterday.
Okay, just refreshing my memory when code freeze actually happens. Code freeze starts Thursday, November 15th, so a week from today. So are we basically saying we're just going to wait and see a week, and if we make it, great. If we don't, we're not too worried about it?
Correct. And I mean, if it does go in, it will be alpha. So the
disabled by default.
Disabled by default.
Sure.
The is like balancing the risk of continuing to have a feature branch versus the risk to the project. We have avoided, there is no chance of having a partial feature merged, so that's good.
Yes, that is fantastic.
Thing, even if it is buggy, or it will not be merged at all.
So I didn't unfortunately have any time to do prep work for this either, but I will just say off the top of my head, I know that we had some mild concerns about switching to core DNS as the default related to performance. That seems to have been resolved. The kubelet device plugin registration, I believe, is something that's going to be blogged about during the 1.13. Like, that's going to be one of the 4 major bullet points or 3 major bullet points we talk about when we blog about Kubernetes. So I want to make sure we feel good about that. And then kubeadmin going to GA is the other one. I don't know that there's anything that SIG Architecture really has to say or do about that. Nothing else really jumped out at us last time from what I recall. The only action item I really remember recording in the spreadsheet here was that Liggett, Clayton, and Tim Allclair were going to go take a look at the run as group feature for containers in a pod. And I don't know where we are on that.
That didn't change in this release. It is still an alpha, and the relevant incremental changes to that alpha feature merged a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah, this was one of those things that slipped from 112 into 113, so generally non-controversial.
Yeah.
I feel like we can probably move on unless anybody has anything they really want to talk about. Brian?
I think we can move on.
Okay.
I think I'll think about the postmortem, doing a postmortem style review later. Again, it's mainly at this late time, I was interested in checking how our review processes were working and whether they were aligned. For 114, we should get an earlier jump to providing guidance earlier in the release cycle.
I mean, I think it kind of boils down to the way to help do that is to mandate that everything is the KEP instead of a feature, because KEPs have SIG architecture a little more baked into the process and a little more technical oversight.
Or we're trying to make that true, but it is
so
not.
I understand we are trying to make that true. I'm telling you, I think that's the lever by which you want to do this and make auditing of all this stuff a lot easier. Okay.
Cool. So moving along, the project overview. This I think should be shorter than 10 minutes, but I think this was you, Aaron. Is that right?
This was also Brian.
Oh, was it? Okay, Brian. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you added that.
No, that's fine. I added these a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, so one responsibility, I think, of SIG architecture is for overseeing the technical aspects, including the health across the entire project. So I started looking at metrics along those lines as related to the reliability discussion earlier. I actually started a thread with some contributor experience folks about some metrics, getting some additional metrics. But I don't have that data yet, so actually I'm not ready to talk about this. So I'll have to punt it to the future.
Okay. Tim and Dims, you've got time. And so there's a thing at the end here that Matt had put in from the KEP board. Before we go to your thing, Tim and Dims, Matt, is that something that you feel like still needs to be talked about this meeting?
No, we've just been trying to get into KEP discussions and to get into deeper ones, and this is one that has architectural concerns.
This is the pruning one?
What?
This is the pruning one?
Yeah.
CRD pruning?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And so I figured if we want to talk about them, this one, it was appropriate to talk about. So, and we don't all agree on it. And so bring it up to air all the concerns and see if we can get movement. And this was an appropriate one.
Being that it's not time critical necessarily, let's go ahead and leave the remainder of time for Tim and Dims. And if the conversation dies out, then we'll move on to that or adjourn, okay?
I just had a quick question. So that's at the design stage, so that would be like a 114 feature?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm turning the floor over to you two.
So go ahead, Dim.
Yeah, I'll set up this thing, and then Tim can act as a counterfoil. So what was happening in a few PRs and issues was we were finding that we had some stale dependencies, and in the sense that, for example, let's take one issue with the Docker dependency, right? When Jess was trying to implement something, she figured out that our Docker dependency was like a year and a half old. So then she had to move the Docker dependency to the latest first, and then she could work on the proc mount stuff. The similar stuff had happened in a couple of more reviews. So I was trying to see if we could come up with a mechanism where we take an inventory of where are we and how far are we behind master of the different repositories that we use, and then kind of like go look at the dependency, the differences, and see if we are missing stuff that we could be using. So that was one way of looking at it. The other way was looking at it was there are people who are using our dependencies and building on top of that, and they are finding that since our dependencies are stale, they were not able to do the things that they would like to do. unless they update our dependencies first and then they use the main KK repository. So there were like 4 or 5 different PRs and issues. This kind of issues came up. So I went through this process of trying to figure out and logging the issue 69776, where we have in each individual dependency and where we are and where we should be, and trying to see if we can get contributors who are willing to, who are trying to help us to go through the process of updating the dependency, filing pull requests, going through the CI jobs, trying to see what the failures are, and then try to get things merged. So that's what was going on in 69776. They were, the list is very long, but the number of PRs was not that many. We probably ended up with like 6 or 8 good PRs there. So, and then when we were trying to do that, and we have to do this for every release. So this 69776 was for 113, because then when 114 opens up, we go through the script that I have to generate one more list of dependencies and so on, right? So, and then Tim, had some questions and concerns about this process and whether it is the right thing to do. Especially, do we need to blindly update stuff, and whether we, whether things are going to break because of that, because our tests don't cover everything that we should be covering. Tim?
So from my perspective, what I see is a stream of PRs that are updating dependencies without any justification for why. And when I asked why, the only answers I got was, well, we're behind. Like, clearly that is not sufficient.
Yeah, I've gotten some of these too.
I've seen you ask why. I've seen Justin SB ask why. I've seen other people ask why. And the answer in some cases is, this new release has features that we need, or it fixes bugs that we need. Cool. I'm happy to take those as answers. I'm happy to take, there's a security fix in the deltas. I'm happy to take performance fixes or transitive needs, like we need this thing which needs that thing. Okay, fine, I can buy it. The upstream API has changed, and because we depend on the older API, we're breaking, the ecosystem. I'll even buy that argument. I don't buy the we need to keep new contributors busy argument. And if the risk is more than just like bugs breaking, there's security implications here. Every time one of these PRs come through, I have to do a scan of it. And there's only like 5 people who can approve GoDeps right now, right? I have to do a scan of it to make sure there's no nefarious init functions, to make sure that there's no obvious things, but I don't have time to do a full code review of these things.
So if we had a staffed code organization effort, this is one of the things I would expect them to be responsible for, is to come up with the policies and the requirements and the tests and the review process, and maybe even automation to do this, and the criteria for when we update. But vendoring and all that stuff related to it, and staging and the stuff related to it, and how we pull in other repos and all that stuff really needs to have a dedicated group of people who deeply understand the method trade-offs, and who can actually take the bandwidth to review or set up automation to help with the review.
I agree.
It looks like there's a few people waiting to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know who had their hands up first, but I see.
Sorry, I'm typing notes. If somebody else wants to type notes, I can facilitate better.
I see Justin and David with their hands up. I don't know. You guys play rock, paper, scissors. Who's there first?
David, you go first.
You're mute.
You're muted, David.
I just wanted to make sure that we can quote Tim on his, if it is causing issues in the ecosystem, we find that to be a reasonable reason to bump. As someone who pulls in a lot of different cube projects and then a lot of other projects on top, when levels conflict, I try to choose one that works, but if there isn't one, being able to bump the level in cube is really helpful.
I'm willing to take that as a reason.
Are you volunteering to document the list of reasons that Tim just spewed out?
I wrote it down. I'm happy to document it. I don't know where.
Just in the notes here looks good to me. It just somewhere where you're like, that one isn't always clear.
No, We should have like a vendoring policy doc in Devel somewhere.
We may already. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Justin.
I was just going to say, I started on a bot to automate some of the PR process here. So it like watches an upstream repo and like creates a PR and then updates the PR with the change list, which sort of makes it maybe a little easier. It doesn't help with the actual review problem, but we can at least streamline this a little and make it like more of a, like maybe build a process around it and have EDE tests sort of.
I mean, I would love to have more tests around these dependencies, and that would make me feel a lot more confident in importing some of these things. I would actually like to, if we want to keep new contributors busy, I'd love to cull our dependencies and just start re-implementing some of the tinier libraries that we implement. Like
there's garbage in those reps that never should have gotten
Yeah,
in there.
I mean,
like trivial things that we could have written ourselves.
part of the Go ethos is a little copy is better than a little dependency, right? So,
Dims?
Yeah. So what I can do is like I can make sure that before it reaches you, Tim, I'll make sure that each one of these PRs have a valid reason from the list that you give me. Will that help?
That would be awesome.
Yes, if this PR had a Y with it, I would have just looked at it, done the review process, and approved it.
Okay.
But something set off my alarms and like,
okay,
why? This was the third or fourth one in the last.
Right. Right. I agree with you. Let's make a list of things, and then I'll make sure that each of these PRs will have a valid, justification.
All right. Where's the list going to go, and who's writing it? I'm happy to contribute. Like,
no, don't. I nominate David.
Okay.
Fair enough.
David, ping me if you want my list of that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Jordan showed up. So Jordan, did you have anything to add here?
I was just going to say a lot of them were coming from the help wanted issue that just said pick a random dependency and update it. So if we want to kind of
can we
put a hold on it until we have like guidance, maybe update that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, let's not have make work issues like that.
I mean, I'm happy to have make work if the make work is delete dependencies or delete code or write tests for.
So just so you know, Tim, I'm waiting for the PR that is going to give us information about the code coverage, so I can add a good first issue, so people can go write tests where they are missing. And it's not ready yet.
Do we have any insight into whether the dependencies we're pulling in have passed their own tests?
No.
So
that would be like, I'd be way more in favor of someone working on that.
Most of the dependencies that we pull in, we're not even pulling in from particular tags.
So just as a suggestion of a place to put this documentation, maybe a code organization folder inside of the SIG Architecture folder, K community, to denote that this is the
you would put it there instead of the page that we have for managing Go dependencies?
Yeah, I would put it. I would put it in the section where we tell people how to update the dependencies.
Put it in there. That sounds great. Sorry, I just thought somebody was suggesting dropping it in the barren wasteland or overpopulated wasteland that is contributors devel.
It is an overpopulated wasteland, but if there's a reasonable place, we should put it somewhere someone will find it.
So we know where it's going, and we know that Tim has it in his head. Now we're just missing somebody to pair with Tim and put it in a PR.
David,
I got nominated.
Oh,
you'll have my list for minutes.
All right. Great. I think we're through the agenda, which is a miracle.
Go back to Matt's KEP. Yeah, and we definitely need to figure out a process for how we're going to review the KEPs. On that specific one, I did see the chatter on Slack, and I agree with Daniel that the implementation is an API machinery concern. The one API, it does have implications for API behavior generally. So one API approver asked my opinion as an API approver about what I thought the behavior should be and what the gotchas were. And I explained some of the past gotchas and why we do what we do right now and what the trade-off is. that I didn't see that get updated in the PR yet, but I assume it will in some form.
Yeah, I think if we want to discuss the details of that, honestly, I think API machinery is a better forum. I think feedback that would be very reasonable is the slowness of comments on that and the fact that this seems to have kind of stalled. We haven't done a good job. We've got a lot of stuff to do.
For what it's worth, a lot of the KEPs are stalled right now, which is one of the problems with the KEPs.
I've been trying to push hard for people to get consensus and merge. I'm finding that a lot of the proposals are like reaching general consensus, but don't have an approver assigned yet and are just not getting merged.
Yeah, which is a problem that we wanted the KEP process to solve that exists with the design proposal process as well, as the discussion would sort of peter out and people would just go implement it, and then the proposal would never get merged. So we do need process-wise to push harder on getting deciders, approvers designated earlier in the process.
Yeah, is somebody able to take this back to API machinery now and to bring it up in a meeting and hash it out?
Daniel?
I mean, David is here also. I think David and I don't agree on what we should do for that one. So probably David and I need to meet.
Yeah, I mean, if it's about behavior, what is the API behavior? I can also chime in on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I brought it here, is there was just not an agreement coming from SIG API machinery, which is the perfect forum for SIG architecture, right? Hash it out with more people with opinions.
I don't think that's going to help in this case. I think that either David or I will be very unhappy. Or both of us.
I was going to say, don't short sell it. You could both be unhappy.
Yeah.
That's what compromise is.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But yeah, I will follow up with API machinery.
Okay. Cool. So Dims has one last thing to hop back one topic, and then we can call it.
Yeah, it's not really a topic. I wanted to put it on this. So you probably saw the traffic on SIG Architecture Slack channel about Hecate dependency. So the problem with that is we have like 3-4 files which ask for LGPL v3 or GPL v2 only, and not Apache. We've been shipping with it for a while now, but then we kind of like got to know about this, and the previous issue that was open against Hecate from 2016 is still lingering, and we haven't been able to wrap it up. So either we are able to get the Hecate upstream folks to change the license, or we have to drop Gluster in-tree plugin. I don't know if we have to do that. So the question is, we need a plan A and plan B. Plan A is hopefully they'll fix their stuff in time for 113. Plan B is, do we need to do anything for if that plan A doesn't happen? That's the question. If anybody has any thoughts. Tim
has his hand up.
Is the Hecate dependency LGPL with the static linking exception? Because we have other.
It's more complicated.
We have other LGPL ones, right? But they all have the static link exception.
This is the one that's really confusing about what license applies, and there are multiple licenses, and there's some multiple ones at the root, and then individual files further.
That's
down.
right.
Different
Yep.
one.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah.
It's something that we use that is a Gluster client. Okay, I haven't tried to take this one apart.
But we have shipped with this for several prior releases. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Is the upstream maintainer just non-responsive, or?
They have been responsive, but not fast enough. And this has been going on since 2016, so not a new problem.
That sounds like non-responsive.
I mean, they've been responsive for the last few weeks, but then not in the last week though.
So the Gluster support mostly came in through the Red Hat channels.
Correct.
We get Red Hatters to take a look at this. My go-to person for this has always been rootfs, but he's not here.
I've already looped in the appropriate people. So they're well aware, but it's just a matter of execution and what's the carrot and stick philosophy around this.
I mean, I don't know, do we need a stick? Like, are we going to say 114, we're going to break Gluster if we can't get this resolved? Are we willing to go that far?
I think we are going to have to do something like that. Just generally, we need to simplify the management, like having to have an expensive meeting about making an exception every single release for a bunch of things is just not a viable position to be in. We're trying to automate license enforcement. This is making that harder.
All right, how about this? I will take the action to make a PR to break the Gluster plugin, and I will assign it to, Red Hatters, is Rudafest still the right person on file system stuff?
Brad Childs, B. Childs.
All right, I'll assign it to Brad, and I'll tag Sod, and I will reference the Hiketi PR or the issue on it, and we'll see where it goes.
Cool.
Thanks, Tim.
There is an open PR about it, which is 67448, which we could look at that as well.
The one that was opened this morning, Justin?
No, August 15th. So practically this morning in Kubernetes timeline, but no.
August. It was open in August.
Justin.
Okay, we can continue the discussion in the channel.
Okay, great. Well, we're at time. Thanks everybody for an exciting voluntold edition of the meeting, and I'll see you in a week.
See y'all later.
Bye, everyone.